Influences, what's going on? Jordan here, RLTK podcast, hanging out here with my boy Chris. Chris, what's
What
good?
up? What's up, man? What's up,
It's
dog?
it's been a minute.
It's been a
We
hot
haven't
second.
podcasted in a hot second, but we're back
Facts.
figuring this thing out. You know,
Trying to.
it took us like a hot second to get this stuff up and running,
Yeah.
but hey, we're here again. Super excited to jump back into podcasting. A lot's happened. We've
Yes.
learned a lot. Um,
Mm,
there's things that we're continuing to move into that we feel like God is kind of moving us into, and so we're really excited about that.
mm,
I guess some updates about those things. So about 3 years ago, we created a youth ministry curriculum company called Reframe,
mm,
and the idea is to basically the vision is to transform the way the church thinks about youth and thinks about youth
mm.
ministry more specifically. And so we've been engaging in that for the past couple of years. Shout out to UYWI. We kind of entered into a partnership with those guys.
Shout
And so
out.
right now we're trying to build this thing so that it can be something that it's an urban alternative in the space of youth ministry curriculum. We're just trying to bring something a little bit different, raw, edgy, real, something we feel like we can contribute to the space, and then
Yes.
also use that to
Yes.
continue to fund mission. And so our goal is to have Real Talk, the nonprofit, kind of come underneath the Reframe and become like just one entity. And so we're really excited about consolidating all of those things and then just continuing to push forward with the same vision, still reaching students, still doing the things that we wanted to do, but having a slightly different funding model, and then hopefully creating some mechanisms for sustainable long-term ministry. And so
Mm,
anyways, super excited about that. Wanted to update you a little bit, but we want to get into what we always want to get into as it's a new season. Me and Chris are going to kick this one off together, kind of
mhm.
talking about some things, and then throughout the course of the season, we're going to do what we do, get some guests on, and really have some deep, meaningful conversations about what's happening in our world right now,
Yes.
how we can engage with Gen Z and with Gen A, like right around the corner, right? Um, even starting to think about them a little bit, perhaps,
Mm,
and give some fodder for you, influences in terms of how you can go about engaging the Gen Zers that you see on a daily basis, whether it's you're a pastor, a parent, teacher, coach, whatever space you're in, give you some context to understand how they think about the world and perhaps how you can communicate the truths that we know are important and ultimately communicate gospel truth.
yes. Yes.
All right. So, Chris, what are we getting into today?
You know what, man? All I gotta say is, man, is that the grease is hot, chicken is seasoned and floured. It's time to start cooking.
Let's
Okay?
go.
It's time to
Let's
cook.
go.
And today we're gonna talk about worldview.
Uh-oh.
And the reason why I think this is a good conversation to have, and I'm actually glad this is like the first conversation, is because it's going to really
It sets the context
frame
for everything, right?
context for everything.
Yep.
And just worldview, man, how people perceive the world as individuals, as a collective, as a society.
Hmm.
You know, how do we see things? How do we see power? How do we see relationships? How do we see family, money, food, everything? How do we see it all?
Yep.
And how can we put these things in a better perspective, and not just for us to live well and to live right, but to glorify God in this? You know what I'm saying?
No doubt.
Ultimately, the purpose is
Yeah,
to
man.
give God the glory, you know? And
No
so
doubt.
I want to share this definition I found. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay.
And it says that worldview is a way of understanding the world and how it works.
Hmm.
And so, like, what are your thoughts on that definition like that? Do you agree with that? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would put it in a similar way. I think worldview is this framework that we have that kind of helps us interpret what reality is and
Mm,
what's right about it, what's good about it, what's bad about it.
mm,
It helps us kind of like decide what is uh, worth, what is of value, right? What is it we're going to go chase after and pursue and give our lives to, and what is not of value.
mm,
What are and then depending on the worldview you have and the framework you have, I like to say framework because I feel like it's a little bit easier to grasp than the word worldview, right?
yep.
Depending on the framework you have, there are going to be things inside that framework and things outside that framework, right? And so there'll be things
Mm-hmm,
that you dismiss because they're outside your framework, your worldview, or there are
mm-hmm,
things that you will accept because they're inside your worldview or your framework. You get what I'm saying? So
yep.
yeah, I would pretty much agree with that. I think that is that is like the best way to understand it. It like affects everything, and everybody has one, right? Like people,
Yes.
may try and say that they don't have a worldview, but they do, right? And even if
Mm,
they haven't thought about it, like the way that they've been raised, the things that they've been taught, the language that they speak, the culture that they grew up in, the
mm-hmm.
school that they went to, the YouTube channels that they watch, whether they're pursuing money, power, wealth, sex, fame, drugs, like
Yep.
whatever it is you're pursuing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That pursuit has been shaped by a worldview, which has told you this thing is the ultimate good, and this is how you should organize your life to that end. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yes, I
Mm.
agree. And I like how you said to organize your life. It's you know, our society is in such deep chaos right now is because we're not organized mentally. You know, we're
Uh-oh.
we're not organized in the sense of how do I structure my life in a way that makes sense, but also can not just benefit me, but benefit society. And I think that, because we're just so focused on elevating self in a sense,
Mm.
um, we're seeping into tribal communities. We're not really coming together, and I think that is because our worldview is confusing. And I think that because we actually don't know what's valuable in society.
Mm.
And I remember like when I was growing up, someone told me, um, they said, because you're black, you're going to have to work 10 times harder as the white man. That's
Mm.
something I was told when I was 12 years old. And now I'm, a little bit older and I'm working and trying to get stuff, trying to understand how the world works. I see that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But and when I was young, that shaped a world for me to see it as. Right. And I think that, you know, this is the danger of not really understanding how the world really works in a sense of physical and metaphysical, understanding how, race comes into play,
Mm.
politics comes into play, sex
Mm.
comes into play, things of that nature, like lacking information on how things operate. And I think that, and that because we lack information of how things operate, we don't know how to structure our world correctly. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to ask you, because we talk to a lot of Gen Zers. One thing that we do is that we go into high schools and we bring pizza or donuts, things like that, and we have conversations with hundreds of students, and we ask them questions. Try to get their perspective, how they see life, how they see their own world. And we also have conversations with parents. I know you have talked to youth pastors. So we always are engaging in conversations. So like what is a worldview or a perspective that caught your eyes? Like, that is something to think about in a way.
Yeah. 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 Well, before that, I want to add something to what you just said because I think it's important,
Okay.
and I'm going to answer your
Okay.
question. I think what one of the things that people don't realize about worldview is it's not just like a thinking man's game, right?
Mm,
So, like the way, like you pointed at it, like this idea of like our world being in chaos right now, right? And there are things
mm,
um, that people are like really being driven by, and this idea of the self is like central, right?
mm. Yep.
But that isn't by necessarily a bunch of people telling you that's how you should think.
Mm,
It's the way our world is crafted and designed implicitly communicates those things, right?
mm.
Like case in
Okay.
point, think about how our houses are designed, right? Our houses are designed so you can drive into your garage, open it, close it, and never talk to your neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That by design is individualist in nature, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you can literally live some next to somebody for years and never know who they are, not even know their name.
Mm, mm.
Like that wasn't a
That's true.
thing
That's a
50,
fact.
60, 70 years ago. Like
Yeah.
nobody did that. And now
Hmm.
we can live in neighborhoods and not even know who our neighbors are. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And so like the things that we're watching, the things that we're pursuing, the way that our world is set up in its design and how things function. I don't even have to go to the supermarket anymore, bro. I can
Hmm.
just order my groceries.
Yeah.
I can order everything off Amazon. And I mean, I
Yeah.
think to some degree, right? And I know people are tired of talking about COVID, but it most certainly helped us become more individualistic because we stayed in our houses for a couple of years,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it kind of programmed us to just get used to doing things that way. And
Yeah.
so you kind of, like you said, this tribal, like the people that you run with are the people that you run with,
Mm.
and it's like they ain't running with nobody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, absolutely, I think that has massively contributed to it. And so, I think for people listening, you may be like, well, I haven't had anybody say these things to me specifically. Sure. But our world is ordered and shaped in such a way by design, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
way that it works and functions, that it communicates to us implicitly, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even naturally, you could say, that like this is the way that we should live. And the reason why it's a worldview is because we don't ever question whether it's the right way to live or not. We're not actually
Mm-hmm.
questioning like if we should, this is the right way to think about things. We've just wholesale accepted that this is the right way to think about things, and it's how we do stuff.
Yeah.
And so like that's how you know it's shaping you. You don't even think about it.
Yeah.
um so yeah, to get to your thing on the whole worldview
Good, man.
question, um I think two worldviews I've been really interested in is obviously like modern, which is like, you know, logical thinking and different things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature. You know, we've explored a bunch of that stuff in philosophy and all
Yeah.
those different types of things, but obviously postmodernism as well. Individualism massively interests me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, if you think about it, anything with an ism on the back end of it is a worldview. And so, like, your
Yeah.
worldview is usually like
Yeah.
a smattering of different things
Yeah.
put all together. Like, racism is a worldview, sexism is a worldview, feminism is a worldview. Like,
Mm-hmm.
any of these isms, there are ways to view the world, right? And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we don't have like one particular worldview, but we have like a smattering of different worldviews coming together to create this like hybrid worldview, or, you know, buffet worldview, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so, usually people are buying into a number of those things. I think technology is another one that's really interesting me as well. I was preaching a sermon at church a couple weeks ago, and I read
Mm-hmm.
this quote that I got from a website talking about the relationship of parents with technology as it pertains to their kids. And it says this: it says, "My daughter, 3, has just learned to speak, and she chatters on and on. So when I get calls from the office of my friends, or when I'm ordering groceries, etc., I shush her or shoo her away, asking her not to disturb me and go and play with her toys. And she would scamper off. I thought
Mm-hmm.
this worked until the other day when she turned to me with a hurt look on her face and said, 'I wish I were your phone. You
Mm-hmm.
always would hold me in your hand.' I was stunned and asked her what that means, and she shouted, 'Talk to me, Mom, like you talk to your phone. I will always talk right back to you.' I felt all teary eyed and decided then and there that I'm going to limit my smartphone usage only to office work till she grows up."
Wow.
And so technology is affecting us in all types of ways in terms of how we relate to each other. And I think it would be real easy for us to be like, well, man, those dang Gen Zers always on their phones, always talking to their friends,
Yeah.
can't have social conversations. And it's like, well, actually,
Mm-hmm.
technology has affected us just as much, maybe even more. And so, like, parents are guilty of sitting on their phones and being on Instagram and Facebook and those things too. And then I
Absolutely.
can't tell you how many Gen Zers I've heard talk about like, bro, my mom needs to stop posting on Instagram. My dad needs to
Yeah.
stop posting. Like, what are they doing?
On
Why
Facebook.
why are they posting? Why are they doing this? Why are they
Mm-hmm.
doing that? Like, it's weird. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
we could say it's affected them, but it's affected us even just as much or even more so. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
massively shifted the way that we even interact with the world. And we have the benefit of knowing what it was like to not have technology. They
Yeah.
don't know anything different.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I always say that me and you, because we're millennials, we're the last generation to actually go outside, you know, actually go on the playground.
We barely go outside, bro.
Hey, facts, facts. You know, when the when the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox starting to come out,
Bro,
it was game over. But I
over.
mean, like, you know, I remember going outside playing with my friends and drinking water hose from the neighbor's yard. You know what I'm
Facts, bro.
saying? And you
Mm-hmm.
know, I think, you know, we don't do that no more. I don't see that a lot. But you know,
Yeah, it isn't.
it's definitely interesting how the effect of perspective has evolved over generations, and how a lot of the things that we think is through what our parents taught us, so through what our experiences taught us. And when I hear worldview, which is interesting to me, is that I hear I hear value system.
Mm,
Um, I hear, what do you value the most? Um, for me, it's like what you perceived is shaped by what you experience and what you read. but
Hmm.
those things shape what you think is valuable. And
Absolutely.
I think that in itself, uh, uh, what we ought to value is missed. You know, it's not like things aren't good. It's just things are being exploited. Things are
Mm,
being miscommunicated.
mm,
Things aren't being seen in the right lens, right?
mm,
And so when I hear worldview, I hear a system of values that is misplaced,
mm.
and which leads up to my next question, which, and I think this is going to broaden the conversation even further, is what do you think the overarching worldview is today?
Well, it's some sort of postmodernism. I
Okay,
don't know. I don't know. Like, I mean, I
there's a
guess we can
level of
define it that way.
postmodernism.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it to me. It seems quite extreme. And a lot of people like to throw around the culture of Marxism thing.
Okay,
And
yeah, yeah,
I mean, you know, I don't. That feels a little bit identity politicky to me.
okay,
So, but I definitely think there is like Marxist ideas for sure.
okay,
Um, and I think like what we're and well, it's not just Marxist ideas, right? It's French philosophers, it's German
mm,
philosophers. It's like it's
agreed.
been there's been this progression throughout human history over the
Mm,
past couple hundred years, right? That's got us to this point.
yeah,
And so it's not like one person, it's like a bunch of guys building on each other's works and taking the things that were said to their furthest logical conclusion
yeah,
in their context and coming to the conclusions that they came to. But what we're seeing is this meaninglessness, right?
mm,
Um, this sense that reality is whatever you want it to be. Your truth is your truth, and you can be whatever you want to be.
mm,
And like we're just changing things that we like never changed before. And
yeah,
so I think for like Gen Z, like in the world that they're living in, like that stuff is being communicated like in terms of like, hey, your truth is your truth. Live however you want to live. Do whatever you want to do. Pick whatever gender you want to be. Pick how you want to dress. Pick how you want to live. Pick what you want to do. Pick whether you want to work or not. Like all those different types of things. Go to school or not.
mm,
So there's that stuff. But then I think also like technology plays a massive part in that too. The
mm,
relationships that are being built, the things that are watching through social media, and the phone communicates something very unique, which is like you can make your world whatever you want to make it, like through
mm,
social media, right, or through
mhm,
technology in general. You get to pick who you want to interact with. You get to pick how you want to present yourself. You get to pick the things that you want on your feed and not on your feed. The algorithm will feed you more stuff to keep you on there, because the uniqueness of it is that you're the product, right?
yeah,
Like the phone isn't the product. The phone is consuming you. You're
mm,
not consuming the phone. And the phone's job is to keep you there for as long as possible. That's what the product does. And so I
mm,
think it like communicates this unique, like, this is your world. You're the god of it. You get to design it and shape it and create it however you want.
mm,
And I think like that, among the things that are being communicated, among the shows that are on our television, among the way that we're thinking about gender and sexuality and all those different types of things, is all coming together and clashing in this postmodern ideology. And then you also have the concept of like the oppressed and the oppressor, right? In power
yes,
structures.
yes,
And anytime there is some sort of power structure that limits you in any type of way, it limits your freedom, right? And so
mm,
therefore, if your freedom is limited, that thing is wrong, right? That's
mm,
the way that the world is being interpreted now.
mhm,
And so when you bring all those things together, you have, in my opinion, a recipe for um, a lot of confused young people who are
yes,
unsure about themselves, unsure about the world they live in, and unsure whether their lives have any real worth or value.
mm.
That's a scary place to be, bro.
Very scary.
And so I
Very
think
scary.
that's contributing to the mental health epidemic too. I think that's
Yeah,
why kids are anxious and depressed, because they don't know if they're worth anything or their life means anything.
yeah. I mm. You know what's interesting is that, as you was talking about how the phones is affecting society, I couldn't help but think about the idea of imagination.
Mm,
And I heard one philosopher talked about how imagination is the closest that we have to reality.
mm,
And like, I think that pinpoints where we are in the sense of You are your individual self. You have the right, to create the own world in your own mind.
Hmm.
And that in itself clings to the sense of your imagination and allows you to create your own world, which is your own reality. And so I think that it's very detrimental in a sense of it kind of leads us away from what is objectively true. It kind of
Yeah,
leads
I
us
mean, there
away
is
from,
no objective truth, right? It's like
well, that's what some of them say.
it's the Ubermensch, right? Like the person who can, the super being who can impose its will
Yeah,
on reality and make reality whatever it wants it to be, right?
yeah.
Or like Sartre said, um, and shout out to Bishop Barron for
Mm.
his
Shout out.
video.
Shout out. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
that went hard. Yep, we watch Catholics. That's true.
Yep, we do.
That boy be killing it
He
on
does.
philosophy stuff. You should
Yeah.
check him out. So, anyways, he made the point about John Paul Sartre's statement. What was it? If God exists, then I am not free. But
Mm.
because I am free, God does not exist, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
once again, it plays into this postmodern concept, all about freedom of the will, my ability to express myself, and essentially anything that comes up against that idea or reality that I want to express myself is oppressive to me. And if
Mm.
that's the case, then probably well, like he says, the ultimate thing that is oppressive is God, right?
Yeah.
Because he is the ultimate uh, rule bearer and bringer of constraints, so to
Mm.
speak, in the sense that if God exists, he creates reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like he orders it and structures it in a particular type of way, and it functions in a certain manner. And
Absolutely.
so that manner that he has called it to function in is actually oppressive to me because it
Mm.
doesn't allow me to function however I want to function, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore, like, I have to declare that God doesn't exist, or I just have to intentionally oppose how God has ordered the world.
Mm. Yeah. No, I agree. And what's interesting to me is that um, there are several thinkers that because we have this thing called general revelation, right? Things that are
Mm-hmm.
obvious if you pay attention to it. And I think that one of the thinkers talk said that if you, in order to change the world, you have to recognize things you can't change, right?
Mm.
You know, and why did he say that? Right? He said that because once you figure out the things that you cannot change, the things that are designed the way they are designed, the things that will not change according to what you think or what you press on it,
Mm.
you will have something to work with. You know, you have a framework to work with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have a foundation in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. But we don't have that in society right now because we're trying to change everything, right? We
Well, I don't think we're trying to change everything. I think we're trying to destroy everything. I think there's a difference. Like, I
explain.
don't think we're trying to change stuff. I think we're trying to break it.
Hmm.
And so change would imply that, like, we see the thing that's wrong and we want to fix it to make it different. I don't actually think that's what we're trying to do. I think we see things that we think are oppressive, and
Hmm.
therefore, because we think they're oppressive, we're gonna break those things.
Hmm.
Do you get what I'm saying? Because if
Yeah.
we break those things, then we're free.
Mm.
But the question is, free to do what?
Right.
And free to go where?
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so, like, I mean, we could tear down all of society, but then what?
Yeah.
What do we rebuild in its place? You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so I don't think that's a question that's necessarily been answered, or is,
Hmm.
or we're even attempting to answer, honestly. And I
Yeah.
think this is the world that Gen Z lives in, right?
Yeah. Agreed. They do live in this world. And I think I like when you said destroy. I think what we're destroying is a standard. And I
Mm,
think we don't know how to create a new standard because, regardless of any debate that you have, regardless of any argument you have with anybody, you have to come down to the fundamental question of then what is the standard, right? What is the moral standard? What is the
yep.
ethical standard, right? You cannot escape
Uh-huh.
this idea. But see, this is why individualism, even though I understand why you appeal to it and why people want to focus on themselves, at the end of the day, there is a such thing as societal meaning, right? Who I am contributes to society, whether I like it or not. And even though we this individualism is very hyper right now. We see it leaking in society slowly. It's leaking into society slowly. And so like we cannot avoid the fact that the masses, the collective matters a little bit more than the individual. And I think
Mm,
that's very uncomfortable for people to accept, right? It's not all about me. It's about my neighbors. It's about my city, right? It's about the next generation, and I think that you was talking about the philosophers earlier, you know, these guys, these guys existed back then, but their ideas are present like they live today,
mm-hmm.
and so it's like we have to understand the fact that ideas within itself is powerful and has consequences. And
Yeah,
I think that we
absolutely.
see that manifesting itself today in this postmodern culture that we live
Mhm.
in. And
And
so
that's the
I
point, right? The
Mhm.
postmodernist says that the standard is me.
Right.
I am the standard,
Correct.
and I get to determine what's right and wrong in my world, in my reality, right?
Yes.
And my reality is whatever I make it out to be. And that's the
Hmm.
point. Like, live your truth, do your thing. Like,
Hmm.
I can't tell you you're not this. I can't tell you you're not that. And that's the world that we live in. The only problem with that is, though, like, what we understand from a human development standpoint is that identity is something that is given to you by the community around you. So
Yes.
when you're born, your parents teach you how to speak, right?
Hmm.
You learn the rules of your family. You operate in the context of those social rules. You operate in the context of the neighborhood that you live in, and the school that you
Yes.
go to, and the relationships that you have, and the socioeconomic stats that you have. Like, all of those things help shape and govern you. The country that you're raised in, right? All
Mm.
of those things help shape and govern you. And so, like, to some degree, there is this need for us as humans to have our identity, to have who we are
Mm.
communicated to us by the people around us. And more
Mm.
than that, for them to communicate that we're loved, we're worthy, we're valuable, we're unique, and
Mhm.
like we actually have a place in this world. And so
Mm.
when we now work from this individualistic perspective, which is like, yo, um, I am whatever I think I am, and that whatever I feel internally and whatever I think and hear, I'm going to project on reality.
Mm.
Now, if I still need people to reflect my identity back to me, it makes sense that I would go to somebody, communicate how I feel about myself to them. And
Yes.
if they don't agree with me, I would consider that harmful and oppressive,
Yeah.
because there's this like biological, natural thing where I
Mm.
need people to like tell
Mm.
me who I am to some degree,
Yeah.
right? But then there's also
Mm.
this clash of worldview happening. And now I have this idea that I am myself autonomously by myself, as if I became that by myself, which when you think about it is just absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to impose myself on reality, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm supposed to do. And so,
That's so good,
like,
man.
even in that, there's this clashing
So
of
good.
like worldviews happening. And I
Yeah.
think that's why when certain people communicate certain things about themselves, I think about the LGBTQ community, hey, I'm
Hmm.
this or I'm that, and somebody doesn't respond in affirmation, it feels harmful and oppressive to them because of the
Yeah.
way their worldview works. And so it
Yeah.
actually makes sense that it feels harmful and oppressive.
Yeah.
Is that true? That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But it makes sense why it's being interpreted that way.
Mm. Yeah. I likes that because you know we live in this existentialism philosophical type thought of you can create your own meaning. And
Mm-hmm.
I think certain people don't understand how dangerous that is
Mm-hmm.
and how it's darn near impossible to create your own meaning out the mud. Like I subscribe to meaning has to be given to you at a certain degree. It has to be given to you at some level. For example, I was born a man. I was born a black man, and I didn't ask to be that. I came out my mother's womb as a black boy, and now I have to understand what does that mean for me. That in itself is meaning for me in the sense that I am a black male. So, what value can I give to the community? That in itself gives me meaning. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't ask for that, but this is what's been given to me. And that in itself helps me to understand more of my purpose in life.
Mm,
And so I have to subscribe to the fact that there is a God who cares. There is a God who understands, and there is a God who has molded you and knew you in your mother's womb and has a purpose for your life.
mm,
And he along your journey shows you slowly and aids with you on your journey to help you see the meaning in your life. And I think that to take him out the picture, I don't think we understand how detrimental that is to society,
mm.
because I don't want to be left alone to figure stuff out.
No doubt.
I had an existential crisis. I was stuck in tears. You understand what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Walking down in the middle of the street with tears in my eyes, man, wondering where I'm going in life. And without the aid of God, I don't know where I'll be. You know what
Mm,
I'm saying? And so it has to be given to you. And I think he does that not just within himself, but also with the community that he gives you, as you talked about earlier. We, even though we try to create things on our own, we still need to be acknowledged by someone else. You understand what
mm.
I'm saying? And I
Absolutely.
think that, and this leads to my one of my questions is like, again, value. That's what
Hmm.
I hear. Value. What is valuable? What makes something valuable? And I want to hear your thoughts on this. And I was thinking about this, man, just trying to ponder what this means is that to understand something that is valuable is to understand how good it is.
Mm,
You know,
hmm.
it's use, right? How we perceive something to be valuable is its use to me, right? This phone is valuable because it has a use for me. You know,
Hmm.
it's good. It's a good phone. And so, like, if that is true, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, if this is true, then do you think we actually understand what good is?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I think we can understand if we
Hmm.
put it in its right context, right? Like, so when we're having this conversation, obviously, if postmodernism is correct, then like none of this even matters. This conversation doesn't matter.
Yeah, fair
Everything we
enough.
do doesn't matter.
Fair
The
enough.
life that we live doesn't matter. Our kids don't matter. Our houses
Mm,
don't matter. Our lives,
mm,
like anything we contribute to reality, is meaningless because, in the grand scheme of cosmic accidents and nothingness,
mm. Yeah.
we just happen to exist and then we happen not to exist.
Mm,
And so, yeah, none of it matters. And so, the problem with that is nobody lives that way. Like,
mm.
nobody lives as if their life doesn't matter, right?
Right. Correct.
And so, I think that in itself points to the reality that it does matter, and it matters because our lives are not just cosmic accidents, but they're designed and ordered and structured by a creator. And
Absolutely.
obviously, more specifically, when we look at creation, creator, religion, faith, like all of those different types of things, what most makes sense is Jesus, right?
Mm,
And so, more specifically, I think when we look to him and when we look to the revealed truth that he gives us in scripture, we can understand what's good, and then we can understand what has meaning, and we can
mm,
understand um, like how we're supposed to live and how our lives are ordered and shaped, um, to experience the good, to experience meaning,
yeah.
and to be responsible for the things that he's called us to be responsible for in
Yeah.
this life. And I think that what we're seeing right now with young people is they
Mm,
have no story to live their lives by. Like, postmodernism doesn't give you a story, it says create your own,
yeah.
because at the end of the day it doesn't matter anyways,
Yeah.
which is no real incentive to create your own story, actually. And so I think what's happening is we're seeing a generation of people who feel lost and
Yeah.
confused, and there's all this bravado and yet all this deep insecurity, and like, existential crises happening, and like I said earlier, anxiety and depressions through the roof,
Mhm.
and they're all looking for identities, things to be a part of.
Yeah.
um, it's like it's just fascinating to see like all the different spaces and places that young people are in, and the things that they're gravitating towards to find their sense of worth and value, because
Mm,
we do have to find one, right?
yeah.
But postmodernism tells us that all the ways that we found worth and value previously are oppressive, and so you can't actually subscribe to any of those, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
to like find new ways, or like the ways that we now don't consider oppressive, right?
Mm.
And so, um, yeah, I think it's extremely problematic, and I think that's why we're seeing the things happen in our society that we're seeing happen now.
Mm.
And I think if we can communicate, I think it's a really unique and powerful opportunity to communicate the gospel really well. If we could communicate the cosmic, large, grand story of the gospel and what Jesus Christ does for us,
Mm.
um, I think Gen Z can understand it very clearly and respond to it, and give their lives to it, because they're looking for something to give their lives to.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got hard questions to ask. Yes, they want to know if they can trust you, but they are looking for a grand story to order and shape their life around. And
Yeah.
we can give that to them in the gospel if we'll do the work. Now, we can't just communicate this narrow, Jesus saves you of your sins and then you get to go to this place called heaven when you die. We need
Mm.
to communicate this cosmic gospel of Christ reconciling the world to himself, and like that happening through the resurrection, and that the resurrection can happen in you right now, and that you
Mm.
can live a different life right now, and that heaven can come to earth right now, and all those different types of things that we see in scripture, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's way more compelling, and I think that's something they'll actually like give their lives to. And
Yeah.
so I think for influences out there, like, we have got to do a good job of communicating the gospel,
Mm.
and understanding that like most Gen Zers don't have any clue about the gospel. Like, we can't assume that they're going to understand things that we understood through osmosis because of the way culture worked and the things that were communicated in our culture that were like Christianish or
Mm.
Christianese,
Yeah. Yeah.
those things don't exist anymore. And
Yeah.
so, um, Jesus who? Bible what? Genesis what? The
Mm.
story of who? Noah what? What are you talking about? And I didn't even grow up Christian, right? But like, I was aware of those stories.
Yeah.
I was aware of those things. I was aware of like, they're not aware of any of that stuff, man, because it's not the world that they grew up in. It's not the world that they live in.
Yeah.
And so, um, I think if we can communicate those things well, we can see some really cool things happen among young people. And obviously, we've seen it ourselves, like being in high schools and having different conversations at work and
Mm.
all the different places that we live and move at. Like, we've had incredible conversations with young people. We've been sat down and asked them questions, and they've asked us questions, and we've communicated that large, grand story of the gospel and their place in it.
Mm.
Some cool things have happened as a consequence.
Yeah, that's dope, man. I think man, to add to what you're saying, I think, you know, the world we live in right now, as you communicated throughout this conversation, is that the world tells you that, you have your own personal truth.
Mm,
You create who you are, right? To understand what that means is communicating that you are your own standard.
mm-hmm.
That's what it's communicating. And here's the danger in that. Ask yourself how many times that you broke your own promises to yourself. Ask how many times that you have betrayed yourself knowing you shouldn't do something and you still did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I can think about that as myself, saying, man, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not. And then I do it again. And now I'm in the mirror. Chris, you loser. What are you doing right now? Right? Like, you're communicating all these terrible things on yourself because you recognize you can't even be consistent in your own promises.
Mm,
And I think what's interesting about the gospel, and what's dope about the gospel, is that Jesus gives us a standard to live by. And not only does he give us a standard, he gives us grace in the standard.
mm,
He doesn't shame us in his standard,
mm,
right? He doesn't look down upon us in his standard. He forgives us in his standard. He loves us in his standard, and he gives us aid in his standard.
mm-hmm.
I think that's what's dope about the gospel. And I think that's a great communication about the gospel to
Mm,
Gen Zers, is that you don't have to be your own standard. A
Mm-hmm.
standard has been given to you, and it's Jesus Christ. Jesus is the standard. God sent his son as the standard. And if you put your faith in him, there is grace, forgiveness, love, and aid for the
Mm,
rest of your life, eternal life.
mm,
I think that is the beauty about the gospel, is
mm.
that you don't have to sit here and make it all up. There is already someone that's done it for you. And I think that weighs on them.
Mm.
I
I
think that
agree.
weighs on them. You know what I'm saying? Because they can't bear this alone. This life is heavy enough. It's heavy, man, and you can't do this alone. And I think, we have to get better as Christians at communicating the gospel more effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and being okay with sometimes not having the answer, but understanding and knowing that there is something that is beautiful that is given to us, and then we didn't even earn it or ask for it. It's just given to us.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's good,
And
man.
so I guess my last question as we land the plane here, and you probably already answered it, but I just want to hear your thoughts on it. Why should Gen Z really consider the Christian worldview? So we talked about
Mm.
the postmodern worldview and what worldview is and just all these other things. What about the Christian worldview, right? Why should Gen Zers consider this worldview? Give it more thought.
Yeah, I think the Christian worldview makes sense of reality.
Okay. Mm,
I think it makes sense of who we are, why we are the way we are, and what to do about it and what we'll become.
mm. Okay.
It makes sense of
Oh,
all of those things, right?
that's
And
good.
so
Yeah.
like those are we want those questions answered. Like, why am I here?
Mm,
Like, what is this life about? Like,
yeah.
what am I supposed to do with it? What happens when I die?
Mm,
Like, I think the Christian worldview answers those questions in the way that makes sense. And I think like ultimately Jesus, man, like Sunday school answer, Jesus. Just keeping it a
mm,
buck. Like this
yeah.
like I can't do it myself. I need somebody to do it for me.
Mm,
And the only one I see who's willing and has actually done it for me is Christ. And so
amen. Yeah.
I think when you like sober up and get honest with yourself, you recognize those things. Like you said, man,
Mm.
I can't tell you how many times I've made promises to myself that I was going to change and never did.
Man, I'm in the same boat, man. Yes.
Just keeping it
Yeah.
a buck, bro. And
Yeah,
so,
man. Yeah.
in that sense, like I need somebody to change me,
Mm,
and not
yeah.
just like I don't need someone to come as a motivational coach and get me out my bed and scream at me. You know, I need someone to change my heart.
Mm,
I need
yeah.
someone to transform my affections. So, like, I used to like this stuff, and now I don't like it anymore because I like this stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't have the ability to change metaphysical things. So,
Mm,
I need someone to come change some metaphysical stuff.
mm,
And so, like, the only person I see that has done that is Jesus. And so,
mm,
when I look at those things, it makes sense.
mm,
Um, and like I said, it makes sense of reality.
yeah.
And so, for me, when I present the gospel, I don't just present it as this like religious narrative. I present it as the way to understand reality. And that's
Mm,
how I literally say it. I think Christianity makes sense of existence, reality,
mm,
everything we see around us,
yeah.
because I
Yeah.
believe it does. I don't believe there's another story out there that makes sense of it the way Christianity does.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, man. Cool,
That's
bro.
dope, man. That's dope. It's good.
All right. Well,
Mm.
episode 1 of this season in the books. I'm excited.
Cooking. Cooking.
Oh yeah, we about to get into it, bro.
That
Like this
chicken
is just
done now. It's ready to
this.
eat. Put some hot
There we
sauce
go.
on that
There's
thing.
just this is a little warm up. You know what I'm saying? Like we going in. We
Yes,
gonna get
sir.
all
Yes,
types of
sir.
guests on here
Mm,
and talking about all different types of things. We
mhm.
got to get into the nitty gritty, man, on some of this stuff.
Yes, sir.
So influences, super grateful to be back. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Share it with somebody. Share it on your social media. like it, subscribe. We're going to be dropping it in all the places that you can get podcasts, including YouTube, because obviously this is a video.
Mm.
And we love you guys, and we will talk to you soon. Peace.
Deuces.